Welcome to episode 318 of the Basketball Podcast. It is a pleasure to have you here. I am thrilled to present this simulcast of a podcast featuring NBA shooting coach Dave Love and his host Matt Robertson from the Coach Dave Love podcast. Please share your thoughts with us on social media and be sure to like, review, and subscribe to the Basketball Podcast and the Coach Dave Love podcast wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome to the Coach Dave Love podcast. I'm your host, Matt Robertson, and with me, as always, NBA shooting coach Dave Love. Dave, what's going on today?
Not a lot, Matt. I'm not usually this tanned. This is just red from a run that I got back from an hour ago, and the body temperature has not cooled down at all yet. So you'll have to excuse if you're listening or watching on YouTube, then red.
Dave's still fanning himself like a Victorian or Georgian woman from the 30s. Very excited to have you here today. Dave, do you want to introduce our guest? Normally we do a little banter. I don't think I want to do that today. We don't have time. Dave, give us a little introduction.
Yeah, this is everybody. This is Chris Oliver, who I think, and he's become a friend of mine, but I think Chris Oliver is one of the most important coaches out there right now. And I'm not saying that to be nice. I'm saying that because I think it's true. Chris was my introduction to skill acquisition ideas that I was completely unaware of. And I think he does one of the best jobs of keeping that language accessible for most coaches. And I think that's his superpower. And so I want to make sure that I have Chris Oliver from Basketball Immersion on the podcast. Welcome, Chris.
Grateful to be here. And Matt and Dave, thanks for having me on. I look forward to having a great conversation.
This is going to be great. And don't feel like you need to dumb it down for me. However, I will, if you say something that is out of my realm from a terminology standpoint, I will flag down the play just to make sure that me and the rest of the people keep on base here.
I do say, just before we start, I do think that the concepts that I share from a motor learning skill acquisition perspective, they are getting jumbled by people using too difficult a vernacular for people. They're trying to come off as incredibly smart, which they are, but for most of us, we just need to understand how to apply it. We need to understand how to apply it in the simplest way possible so that it impacts our players and our teams, and then of course our coaching because of it. Matt, if there is something, then I do encourage you to call it out, because I do think that helps everybody have a better understanding of the language that we're trying to put forward here.
And then, Chris, just to piggyback on that, I'm pretty open about the fact that I am not an expert in this world, and I'm becoming educated. So I want to encourage you, if I get something a little wrong, I want you to jump in and say, teach me, because that's, as much as we're friends now, that's the thing about you that I value the most, is that you're willing to say, that's cute, that's nice, but that's not actually true.
I don't know if I ever say you're wrong. I don't think anybody's wrong. It's just a question of, is there a better way? That's really all we're trying to put forward for people. And again, I think too many people are a little bit too confrontational about this, saying somebody's wrong or right. And even if you use variable practice in the wrong way, all good. The intent is there to be able to do things differently. And not to jump ahead, but look, how much has technology evolved in the last 15 years? How much has it changed the way that we live, the way that we act, the way we interact with people? And yet, from a basketball coaching perspective, very little has changed in the last 15 years in most practices. And the question is, why, is the constant question. So really, we're just here, Dave, and you've done a great job, Matt, keeping Dave on this throughout the podcast that you've done with him. We're just trying to add to, make over, or subtract from what people do. And that's the goal. There's no goal here to tell anyone they're wrong or to make them feel bad because they don't understand what contextual interference is. That's not a big deal. Just, can it help your coaching?
It is interesting because Dave has done a great job of that the last little bit, where a couple of the pillars of things, as when I was a player and as a coach, form shooting and spot shooting. Dave calls form shooting slow shooting close to the hoop. And he's like, it's not optimal. It's not bad. It's just not good. There's a better way.
Do we want to go to that right away? Like, I challenge any coach in the world to go try form shooting on their own and stand like 1 foot, 2 foot from the basket like you do, and feel where your neck position is. And that's just the simplest way to explain it. Dave can go deeper with all the challenges of it, but for me, it's just a really unnatural position that you never shoot from. So why are you doing something in your practice that isn't the same as what you do in a game? And that's a general kind of understanding of it, but that applies to so much in coaching. And I always use 3-man weave. Form shooting is the other one I use because they're the easiest one for people to understand, because in context you go, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I don't actually ever do that in a game. I don't ever shoot from 2 feet from the rim with proper basketball shooting form. That's just never happening. So why are we spending so much time practicing something that doesn't
Chris,
happen?
I'm really curious. If you were to do your version of form shooting, I have my version of form shooting, what kind of distance would you start from?
So I think it varies a little bit by age, but I would say, and again, my knowledge is experiential. It's experiential as much as it is evidence-based. I've been in this space for 25, almost 30 years now. With these concepts around skill acquisition, motor learning aren't new. So I just want people to know this isn't me just in a lab researching. This is me trying these things and saying what works. And I've had the greatest experiment of my lifetime with my 2 daughters now 10 and 12. But for both of them, I would say it varied at different stages. Again, we all walk at different stages. Like, why is it a surprise that they don't follow a checklist? It's very nonlinear. But I would say as a general parameter, let's say 8 to 12 feet, just inside the 3-point line, just inside the 3-point line, and then some variation within there so that they can, for example, for my 12-year-old, we'd probably have to move her a little closer to the free throw line, And
you said 3-point line. I was going to clarify, but
yeah, no, I know you're looking at me. Oh my gosh, yeah, because all I want to do is shoot. But anyways, within the free throw line, 8 to 12 feet within the free throw line. And my oldest, for example, I want her to be able to jump slightly when she shoots, when she does these reps. So we don't, in fact, do any of these traditional kind of static feet on the ground. And I would say that's the other challenge, Dave, that you can talk about a little bit deeper is, man, how many shots do we rep where their feet don't leave the ground? And to me, there's some benefits, certainly, to isolating upper body. We call it 1, 2, and 3 in terms of that motion. Different people have different things with it. But certainly there's some point to it. But we'll get into deeper kind of concepts with this. But it's not repeating it over and over again. And back to your whole question, Dave, I feel that people focus too much on form over function. And that connects to too much repeatability, not as much adaptability. And we can talk about that. But if Dave loves looking at a shooter, maybe an average person might say, oh, they repeat the exact same form every time. But there's variability even within the best shooters, within their range of motion, their degrees of freedom, whatever we want to talk about in terms of that. And that's a big thing. And that's why I won't do traditional form shooting, because it doesn't replicate what a player actually needs to be adaptable within a game.
Gentlemen, this is a great tangent, but I need to, again, I could listen to this all day, but I need to step in because I need to introduce the shtick so we can get going. And it is a shtick today. The shtick today for the audience is that we have 2 people who are doing a lot of work in skill acquisition concepts. For coaches new to this terminology and to this subject matter, both of you have your top 5 list of things to at least get us started, or the most important things that you consider for us as average coaches or coaches just getting started in these concepts. So I'm going to be your game show host today. Chris is the guest. You have the honors. Can you give us your number 5? What is the 5th most important thing, again, in your opinion, for coaches new to these concepts to understand?
Okay, I'm not going to start simple. I'm going to start with something called contextual interference, because I think it encompasses everything that we're going to talk about. And the simplest way to understand this concept of contextual interference is that we're trying to interfere with remembering. Why do we want to interfere with remembering? We want to interfere with it because we want a player who's learning how to shoot to constantly be mindful. We don't want them to just use rote memorization where they go, okay, I'm going to shoot the same shot from the same spot over and over again and get good at that. But then I go to a different spot, which is a novel problem, and now I've got to solve it completely differently. We want them instead to be able to be adaptable in different places. So contextual interference is basically that. So basically, I'm going to lump it in a bunch with things together: random variable practice, interleaving, mixing. Maybe that covered all my 5, but basically I feel more coaches could benefit from it. So let's give you a definition. Contextual interference, basically a motor learning principle where practicing variations of a skill enhances learning and retention compared to repeating it over and over again. So it's basically what I said in all those different ways. Why do we want to use it? We talked about improving adaptability already. We talked about this ability to be able to reduce the reliance on this rote memorization, which is memorization. Again, Matt, you were probably a good student. Dave and I, maybe not as much, but man, I was so grateful for how many teachers that I had throughout my years from college on down that literally gave us something that all we had to do is memorize and throw it back up on the paper. And what I really recognized at a really young age is, oh, that's awesome, because that's a cheat for me, but I'm not learning anything. Like, learning comes from meaningful interaction and engagement with the material, and then this process of retrieval practice. So at some point I'm on the verge of forgetting, and then I have to retrieve that information and then bring it back. And that leads to retention.
Can you give me a practical sort of drill-based example of contextual interference?
100%. Let's stay on the form shooting concept, okay? Let's say you actually do form shooting. So you do it at a spot, let's say 8 feet. I do a form shot. Like, instead of doing it from the same spot over and over again, obviously variable random practice, we start moving different spots, but I'll go further. Mix the different types of form shots you do. Let's say you do a 1-foot form shot. Let's say you do a wide foot form shot. Let's say you do a roll up form shot, and you mix those 3 things together so that each time you come back to A, you have to remember A. So I'm learning in this A, B, C back to A format instead of, and then I go B, 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 B. And it's avoiding really this block concept, which is memorization. Mixing it, using this contextual interference helps lead to more of a permanence, which is what we know. Learning is a permanent change in behavior. So we want to develop that type of mindset with how we practice, because it just leads to permanence.
So what you're saying is that contextual interference is the basis for variable practice. Is that kind of the basis term? Is that a good description?
There's a lot of things that encompass it, but that's a big part. But if you want to think about all these things in a really simple way, it just increases engagement. It makes someone mindful. And that's what we want. We want mindful practice. And there's all these different terms. And that's why I'm saying, don't get hung up on the terms like deliberate practice and all these other things. Yeah, we want all that. But really, we just want them to be mindful and not mindless when they practice. And that's what contextual interference helps them do.
Dave referenced this last podcast where we were talking about a way to make spot shooting just a little more engaging. And he just said, you just need a way, even if it's once every 5 shots, to make sure their brains are turned on, because that means they're on for 5 shots. Even though it only has a reaction once every 5, the brain is turned on, which again, I'm not doing in my practices, and I definitely was not doing as a player. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. It's such a simple thing and a big impact is, again, like you think about, I mean, we're going to jump around, but you think about it in a game, like you never shoot the same spot in the same way ever, even a free throw, like time and score, probably where you place your foot within a millimeter is different. Like there's all these differences, like nothing is ever perfectly replicated in the game. So don't get obsessed with replicating it in practice. Get obsessed with, okay, whatever I'm doing and however I'm doing it, can I be successful with that technique applied in the context of the game?
Yeah, the analogy that I always give, and I haven't worked this totally out, Chris, I'd love you to jump in and workshop this analogy for me. Our goal as shooters is, or shooting coaches, is not to get players to be able to hit the bullseye every single time, to throw the perfect dart. It's to get it so that the bullseye's in the middle of the board. They're going to miss. They're going to be in that area, and we just need the area to give them wiggle room on all sides, not to train as though you're going to freaking bullseye every single time that you throw a dart. And so I'm still workshopping the analogy, but
a sports science professor put that very similar. I love that analogy. Put it very similar for me, saying, actually, they feel that in order to assess someone's ability to shoot, we should assess their ability to miss in certain specific places. That true expertise is, okay, miss back of the rim, miss front of the rim, miss side of the rim. And that would highlight their incredible expertise. And we think about that your dart analogy is perfect because it's bullseye, like incredible. Like I got to bullseye, but now I got that.
right.
Get a 20. I don't know what to do. I got to hit somewhere else. And that's incredible adaptability. Because even though I'm focused on it going there, sometimes it's, I got to change. And that relates to basketball shooting in the sense that I don't always shoot from straight on. And Dave, how many people just do form shots? Let's just Every coach in the world can improve their players by just not doing form shots straight on. Do them from different locations. I saw you do an amazing thing where you did it dribble into form shots. I love that. Just a brilliant thing that you add a little bit of variation to it where now they've got to settle and they've got to get their repetition from that.
The biggest thing I've learned from you over the last, I think it's been 8 or so years that you've been really influential in my career. And I think the first thing that I learned was like, stop doing stationary form shooting. You've got your no 3-man weave t-shirts. If I'm getting t-shirts made up for my shtick, because that's the word of the day, it's going to be like, stop doing stationary form shooting. Add movement to it. And so, thank you.
Yeah. Or pauses or anything. Like, think about it, Dave. Like, you never shoot 5 shots in a row, but we stand at the corner and we get five passes right in a row. Bam. How about just pause the pass? I do it all the time with my daughters. If they get in any type of rhythm, I just pause the pass.
Yeah.
And they get frustrated, right? But I'm like, this is game. Or I tell them, hey, go run, go do a push-up, do something, just change it. Because again, that shows adaptability. Can you make the shot after the pause is more of a test of your game shooting than shooting 5 in a row from the same spot and hitting them.
When I was playing pro, I was coming off the bench and like sometimes sitting for 30 minutes before coming off the bench and really struggling. And I had a coach who played in the NBA, coached in the NBA, named Mike Evans Sr., incredible guy, incredible coach. And I told him, I was like, I'm really struggling with this. What do you suggest I do? He said, you need to practice like you play. And I was like, what does that mean in this context? And so go for a workout, get a nice lather on, and then we sit down and talk for 30 minutes. And they'd be like, all right, go. And then have to settle hit shots in different spots for 6 minutes and then sit back down again. And it just is the earliest version that I have of like a game representative situation, more of a macro theme than a micro theme, but it was very helpful.
Representative practice is one of the most important things. Again, if these things seem simple, and maybe they are, but your example is perfect, but think about your whole practice and go, how much of that practice was not representative of the game and the way you played? And really, to be truthful, and I know it's not always realistic, Matt, we should have had you, say you have an hour and a half practice, we should have had you only practice sometimes for 10 minutes within that hour and a half practice. Whoa. How about that? Not every practice, because obviously there's a certain volume and stuff that goes with it. But if I'm thinking about my bench players and my role players, who would be brave enough to do that? And I'm not talking development here. Like, we're talking youth level development. We're not talking about that. Everyone practices, get as many reps and as many decisions as you can within a practice. But I'm talking about that professional level now, or that elite college level. It's all of a sudden, certain players should only practice for 20 minutes at different segments of practice, because that represents it.
Wow. Okay, Coach Dave, I'm going to shake that off. That was nuts. Coach Dave, give me your first one. What is your first skill acquisition concept that you think new coaches to the idea should know?
I almost want to say it doesn't matter what I think. I almost want to say, let's just go back to Chris's number 4.
Hey, let's go.
I'm going to give 30 seconds and Chris gets more time. Number 5 for me, I want people to understand internal and external cues. We've got a whole podcast on that. It's one of the early ones. Understand that the words we use matter, and that it's not just explaining necessarily to bend your wrist back.
One of the hardest ones.
For me, it is.
It really is.
I'm terrible at it.
I understand it, but it's very difficult. Extend the ladder fully. When I talk to my daughter about shooting, we talk about, extend your elbow, extend your wrist, extend it fully. We say the ladder didn't go all the way to the top. You didn't get to the top, right? You couldn't climb to the top because the ladder didn't get there. But I really do struggle with coming up with some of these sometimes, especially in those moments. So usually a lot of it is initially the internal versus the external cue. It's just very hard. I hope somewhere we make a list.
I start with an internal, typically. Like I want to explain what I mean, but then, and we did a whole podcast on this, but then go into an external cue that makes sense to me. But almost immediately, I'm asking guided questions for what do you think about? And to search for an external cue that makes sense to the player, which is selfish on my part, because then it's taking the load off me to say, hey, I've got to find a way that makes sense to you. Let me just search for the way that makes sense to you.
I was going to say, Dave has this concept, and Chris, do you have, just to slide in here before we close this part of the topic, do you have your strategy to get to an external cue that works for a player? Like Dave, again, directed questioning whole podcast about it. He has some great stories. What is your strategy in this situation?
I'm going to go listen to your podcast. But the main thing to me is, look, we don't have to be perfect before we coach them. I think the obsessive preparation and the obsessive, I got to know every answer. I never know any answer. Like when I go work out my daughters, or when I coach now, I'm going to go coach 10 to 12-year-olds tonight. I am going to show up with the first thing to do. Okay, we're going to do this. After that, I am going to figure it out based on what I see from them. So all these internal versus external cues, the external cues, I'd say every one of them, to Dave's point, has come after I've already started to work with someone, and something becomes cued because of them and our conversations and our interactions. And that's okay. I don't have to be an expert every minute. I want to engage them in the process and engage them in the conversation.
You just reminded me, was working with an NBA player, and he had his general skills trainer as well. And that the skills trainer had his list of what we're going to do today. We're going to do 10 reps of this on the right side. We're going to do 10 reps of this on the left side. And did not deviate from that. And I asked the trainer as we start to get to know each other, and he asked for advice. I said, what do you do if 5 reps is all you need? What do you do if you needed 30 reps? Trying to get him to understand, don't script this whole thing out. And it's not the number, feel it. Are you doing well? Good. Make it harder. Are you struggling? Okay. Make it easier. And don't be a slave to what you have written on the
We're fighting historical and cultural norms in coaching. If a parent looked at that, an athletic director looked at that, your boss looked at that, a colleague looked at that, they say, you're terrible. You're not preparing. Look at me. I've got this binder, this season plan. And I'm like, I'm not saying don't plan. I'm not saying don't do that, go through that mental process. But I'm saying, again, be adaptable. You want your players to be adaptable, you be adaptable.
That's the clip right there, Dave. Mark that one down. All right, Chris, give us your second skill acquisition concept you think
game shooting. Game shooting. Okay, so we're keeping it really simple here, but game shooting. Everyone says, oh, we're doing game shots, we're doing game shooting, and all I see them do is come off a flare screen because it's in their offense, and it's all on air, meaning there's no defense. That's not game shooting. It's not game shooting if it's not preceded by a decision. Everything we do in basketball goes through the same process of I perceive. So perceive, decide, execute, feedback on what happened. And perception action coupling is the fancy word for all that. I just simplify it for people and say, first I perceive. So Matt passes me the ball, Dave's my defender running at me. I perceive the pass and I perceive Dave, his distance relative to me, my distance relative to the rim. Look at how many things there are to perceive. I've just said 3. There's more than that. And then based on that perception, I make a decision. Oh, I have space from Dave, so I'm going to shoot the ball. I don't have space, I'm going to pass it or drive it. The third thing is the actual technique, the biomechanical technique. And again, if you think about the way most basketball is taught, it's taught from a technique start. We've got to build this base, what people would call fundamental. We've got to build this technique. And when they have this technique, then they can play basketball. You don't have to build decisions after the fact. They can be included. And if anything, I would start with the decision because the decision is more important than the skill. And if you think about that example there, Matt and Dave, it's more important for me to decide if I'm open or not relative to the pass and relative to Dave than it is actually my technique to shoot. The technique is important. Don't say it. Coach Oliver said it's not important, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is to shoot an open shot in range and in rhythm. So those things come with it. So just simply this notion of what a game shot is. Oh, I'm getting game shots. And I'm all for on-air shooting, but that's player-led development in my mind. That's a player doing it on their own. Now, I rebound for my daughters because I love spending time with them and all that. And they'll shoot a bunch of just on-air shots, variability. We incorporate all these concepts, but they're just shooting on air and not making a decision. So I get it, but those are massive volume of reps relative to comfort and confidence to be able to get them this feel and this touch or all these different things that coaches throw out there, whatever word you want to use. But a game shot is a decision first, and do more drills where they have to make a decision before they shoot.
Perceive, decide, execute. What was the fancy terminology used for that, just for my own?
Perception, action, coupling. Yeah.
Done.
So that's the motor learning skill acquisition way of saying it. And there's tons of information on that. But that's really the foundation for almost everything that I share about the decision. And if anything, I've become a decision training expert in terms of how coaches add decisions. If I go into a college practice and the coach wants me to improve practice, generally it's me showing them within their practice design how they incorporate decisions so that it leads to more transfer. And what we know about transfer from practice to game, the most important thing that leads to transfer is this perception, the perception, right? Because again, skill is the third part of it. So I want to have a practice filled with perceive and decide opportunities. And that's where we want to maximize it. That comes back to a whole different conversation about small set games and maximizing decisions within practice, except for Matt, because he's only getting 10 minutes in the practice because that's all he needs. But within those 10 minutes, I want it to be fruitful of decisions where you have to perceive and decide.
Chris, there's a couple ways that I use decisions since you made me aware of this concept. And one of them is forcing the adaptability, which I think is my way of saying what you're talking about right now. But then I'll also use that decision, and this, to me, this is different, as the contextual interference. That I'll, early on in relearning the biomechanical shooting form, I'll use an either-or decision as a distraction from the movement that they're making, and say, okay, I want you now, and I stole this from you, so I try to always give credit. I change my feet. I want you to read my feet. And all of this is really just a distraction so that you have to then remember what the habit that we're trying to change, the habit that I want you to be working on. And yeah, I don't know if I had a point to that other than to say thank you.
That's contextual interference. That's contextual inference. So it's practicing variations of a skill within a single session, and obviously enhances learning and retention. But it's also about, in simpler terms, it's mixing things up. Right? It creates a need for the brain to adapt and problem solve, leading to this deeper understanding and better overall retention of it. So I love it. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be run and come off of a flare 40 different ways. It can be literally just that simple. When you come off that flare, there's variations within that in terms of what you have to perceive and decide.
So perception, action coupling, contextual interference. We're going to take a super quick break while I process. We're going to give you coaches out there a chance to write some things down, and we'll be back in a second.
Hey there, basketball fans. I'm NBA shooting coach Dave Love, and I've got exciting news just for you. Introducing my exclusive, free basketball shooting newsletter. It's packed with insights and techniques straight from the hardwood. Have you ever wondered how NBA players improve their shots? Or how you could get to the next level, whether you're a player, a coach, or a budding youth player? My newsletter brings all this and more directly to your inbox. Each edition is a deep dive into the world of basketball shooting. I'll share some of the tips and ideas that I use with my NBA clients, tailored for every level of the game. But wait, there's more. Subscribers receive exclusive monthly discounts on my online products. From training videos to personalized coaching sessions, you'll get it all for a fraction of the price. And the best part of all, it's absolutely free to join. So what are you waiting for? Elevate your game and join a community of passionate players and coaches from around the globe. Signing up is easy. Just visit CoachDaveLove.com.
And welcome back. Okay, so we've got through two of Chris's skill acquisition ideas. Dave, what's your second one?
My number 4 will be block variable random practice. And this is ultra basic, but this was really my starting point. As I started to learn these things, I had to learn that doing the same thing over and over again doesn't lead to transfer to games. And then also understand that practicing in a game-like environment isn't necessarily the perfect environment to learn in. And so block practice has advantages. Random practice has a lot more advantages. And there's this window in between of variable practice that I think most people end up missing. And so learning how to use all these, or these 3 different tools, was probably my introduction to these ideas. And this isn't like, yeah, I'll leave it there, but I would dive into block variable and random practice and go from there.
It's where everyone should start. Just think about it. Just don't shoot the same shot over and over and over again. This isn't an NBA pre-draft workout where we're trying to show our success. If we're talking about development, then we're talking about players being challenged. And I know challenge point's a big thing for you guys too, but they're trying to be challenged so that they have to learn how to solve a problem and adapt. And they don't do that if it's blocked. They just memorize and regurgitate. They may have to think on the first rep or two, but after that, they get pretty used to it. And anybody that's gone to the driving range is playing golf, it's the greatest example, isn't it? Man, I can really hit my driver on the driving range. But when I go to the course and play, man, I'm not hitting it as well because I didn't practice the way that, and I've since learned that, and I still don't necessarily hit it well, but at least when I've gone to the driving range, I'll always do driver, some other iron, and then chip, and then come back to driver, because that's how you play golf, and you're representing the game. And think about that analogy to basketball, and it's easy to apply.
Chris, I would assume you're among the league leaders in anti-block practice, but I'm also guessing there are specific occasions where you would use it. Am I wrong, or are there? And if so, when?
Look, again, I hope I'm portraying myself. Like, I'm not an anti-anything coach. Like, I've coached too long. Like, I literally have coached too long to say that this is the only thing and this is an absolute and this works. We know that's not the case. And I think all good coaches are that. And that's where it unnerves me when people are pushing something as this is the solution. This is what you should be doing. Yeah, I believe 90% of the time I should be doing that too. But there's 10% of the time where I have to figure out something because it's not working. And usually I think for block practice, that relates to comfort and confidence. Is that I remember working with my niece once. She was a pretty good high-level Division I player. And the first time I did BDT, which is adding these decision cues to shooting, basketball decision training, where it's as simple as I pass her the ball and my hands are out. She has to pass back. If my hands are down, she shoots, creating a little bit of this random and variability that a lot of people who know my brand have probably started from there. The first time she did it, she almost broke down. Yeah, Dave's showing the face. Almost broke down because she wasn't as successful. But then the next time we did it, she struggled just as much, but we charted the shots. And I said, okay, look, you still shot 60%. And that's pretty darn good, especially if you're correlating that to game percentages. There's going to be a drop in game percentages because of the psychology of the game and all the different factors in it. But if you can become like a 45% shooter, it's going to way more translate. But look, you shooting 90 and 100% in practice doesn't translate. We know that. And there's been a ton of free throw studies on that where somebody goes and just shoots block free throws, 100 of them. That doesn't transfer at all to their game percentage because, again, you shoot free throws completely differently in a game in the context of 100 in a row. So those type of things.
I think that the sort of concrete and definitive answers get so many clicks because a lot of coaches in my shoes and coaches who haven't done the deep dives, they just give me the answer, give me the easy way. I just want to know the answer. And Dave, my lawyer buddy and Dave have the same answer when people ask them a question. It depends, or probably not really. There's not a clean, definitive answer for any of this stuff, but there are degrees and it is a spectrum. Like form shooting, not ideal. It's not the worst thing you can do. The worst thing you can do is just not to be playing or practicing at all, right? That's unless you need rest, but that's a whole other conversation. But for all of us, let me just divert down that tangent. For us, we want a concrete answer, and they get so many clicks because it's supposed to provide that, and that's where the conflict comes from. It's crazy.
Chris, anyway, what's number 3?
So first of all, I want you to have a ton of clicks. Yeah, I want you to have a ton of clicks, and then this will help hopefully, which is, okay, the best way to say this, reduce instruction or limit it. Look, you're all experts. You're more of an expert than the player. Okay, so don't remove your ego from it. Coaching is not constant instruction. Coaching is in fact a removal or a reduction bandwidth feedback, I think is the term in motor learning and feedback, but it's just reduce it. Look, I don't need to give them information on every rep. And I think that's the biggest thing I see with any shooting coach I'm around is they feel like they have to justify themselves all the time. Well, you're already justifying yourself by just spending time with the player. That's an incredible service you're providing that player by just holding space for them. So hold space. I'll give you an example to really quickly bring it home because Matt wants examples that are just clickbait. Let's go. So When my daughter first started shooting, so even a new shooter, I would just say shoot. And I would just ask her occasionally, let's say on every 6 to 7 shots, how does it feel? And then I would cue her somehow and say, okay, try this. How about have your feet shoulder width apart instead of, and we call that position one wide, but have your feet one wide instead of two wide. Have your feet in these positions. And I would literally have her try wrong things and right things on every few reps, and then just ask her, how does it feel? And then gradually she would find her own place. And that's this applying these ecological dynamics to shooting is I'm trying to help them self-discover what works for them. And that's where I come back to function over form. If you see the progression of my daughter's shot, whether she's a good shooter or not, now I don't know, that's up to other people, but it's really up to her in the games to prove it. But really when she started, people would constantly, if I posted her shot, they go, oh, she needs to do this or this. And I'm like, dude, just, it's nonlinear. It's nonlinear. It's coming. It's coming. But you know what she could do at a really young age is generate rhythm, power without any extra body movements. And to me, that was the thing that I was like, okay, it comes back to all those things. I gave her space to be able to figure it out on her own rather than got her bogged down with instruction. And now, Matt, Dave knows this a little bit, but Matt, if you were around my oldest daughter and you saw me rebound for her, if I start to give her much feedback at all, she doesn't want it. She goes, I got it. I'll figure it out. And I'm like, thank gosh. Because really, I'm not that smart either. Your shot better than I know it. But occasionally I'll have to cue her. And that's the point. We're there to occasionally.
One of my favorite workouts I ever did was with Aaron Gordon after his rookie year in Orlando. And so we've been working together for about a year by this point. And we had a new head coach that came in and was sitting by the side of the court watching this workout for 45 minutes. And in that workout, I said 5 words. And I thought, this head coach is going to think I'm an idiot and that I'm just supervising this workout. But Aaron and I knew each other, or I knew his shot so well, I could give him feedback just by where I was standing on the floor. And so why do I need to say anything when I can move over here and that's enough to just remind, oh, am I paying attention to this idea? And I love that. Like I find I'm talking way less and I'm asking infinitely more questions than I did 10 years ago.
And as they become a better shooter, you're only giving feedback on outliers, right? But not an outlier, not the one miss, right? The one miss is fine. We miss. It's the multiple misses that are outliers. So let's say my daughter has an issue with low arc because she darts it instead of lifts it. Okay, then I'll just cue her. If she misses, not just one, oh, she missed one time, I got to give her feedback. No, 2, 3 times, and maybe it's 2, 3 times out of 7, out of 6. I just cue her, extend the ladder, and that's it. That's coaching.
Dave always says 2 times out of 10 or 1 time out of 10 is a mistake. 6 times out of 10 is a habit. He said, I'm coaching habits. I'm not coaching mistakes. And
Right.
That is exactly what you're talking about and really resonated. And the first time I saw him work out a player, it was jarring initially when I was like, where's the feedback? I want to hear all the feedback. 20 shots, feedback, 15 shots, feedback, and looking at the rationale, looking at the questions and the progress. It's brilliant. Dave, can I get your third skill acquisition idea that you want to chat about?
Knowledge of performance, knowledge of results, and when to use each of those things. I see so many coaches in a learning environment cueing or coaching to the result and not the process that's going to eventually improve the result. And so I would dive into like where are we directing attention at what time and in what situation. When you're outside of the gym and you're setting your goals, great. Have the knowledge of results. That's when to talk about them. When you're in the gym working on a habit, it's habit-based. Be aware of the performance that's going to cause the result. And if the performance, improving the habit is the important thing, then I never track anything, especially early on in practice. I'm never like, okay, you got to make 5 to the next spot. If that's what I'm teaching, if that's what I'm cueing to, then the player is going to do whatever they want, whatever they feel is necessary to get that meaningless result. And I've got the long game in mind where I'm trying to build a new habit. So all my feedback is directed towards the habit.
And this might, all these steal from our list of 5. Matt, we've got more than 5 at some point here, but we'll keep going. But it connects to Carol Dweck's research on mindset, right? This growth mindset, which is I'm praising effort, not results. So I'm praising the effort of my daughter to go and shoot and to practice her shooting rather than she go, oh, you made 300 shots. You're amazing. Now you got to make 4. No, I'm just like, hey, great effort working on your shot. And then I'm trying to connect it by noticing that it's helping her in games. Hey, you shot it really well today. I know it's because you're putting a lot of effort into your practice. That's what Dave's saying is like, and I'll say the other example, you talked about getting kind of social media hits, but I posted a thread on coaching games and it's 1.1 million views now. And I'm like, Dave saw it, but the most important piece in there that connects to what Dave said is this coach clap. Do you remember what it was, Dave?
No.
If somebody's shooting, what am I doing as a coach? I'm clapping in advance of the result because it was a good shot for them. That's a coach clap. To me, that connects with so much we do in practice and games, etc. Is again, was it the right decision? I'm going to keep coming back to that. Was it the right decision?
I'm sure there are players out there that as I get to know them, they think I'm an idiot because I'll say as they're shooting a shot, like, oh, great shot. And then they airball it. And no, I don't care about that outcome. You executed the habits that I believe are going to help you in the long run. You're just not good at them yet. And so that was a good shot. The result was not.
Specific to that, Dave.
Okay.
Try and add something more specific to that. What could you add more specific to that?
What it was
shot,
that was
doesn't give much.
Yeah. What was it that was good?
The great shot.
Yeah.
Can we
make your feedback very specific with that knowledge of results type of thing?
Again, dumb this down for me a little bit. Can we talk about what makes a good shot and how is the best way to teach this? Because one of the things I see when I go to our Tuesday night scrimmages where our guys are playing is like, all these guys are good hoopers. All these guys can play in a system. Some of the worst shot selection in my brain, it hurts me every time. When you guys are talking to players, talking about good shots, is this an explicit, this is a good shot, or are you teaching the implied version? How do you teach what a good shot is what I'm asking.
I think we're going to view this from
environment teaching.
Sorry, Chris. I think we're going to view this from 2 very different lenses. I'm really curious to hear what Chris's answer is.
Yeah. The environment teaches us what a good shot is. We don't have to teach it. So the environment is what you create from the beginning. So we create it within principles of play, explain to players about space, advantage, and then shot selection relative to gold, silver, and bronze medal. Bronze medal is a contested shot. Silver medal is an open shot. Usually at the higher level, it's a open 3 because that's what we want. We don't want mid-range. And then a gold medal would be a layup. So we define that for them so that it's really no gray area. That's a bronze medal. And literally you'll see me and hear me. And last night at AU practice, all I was doing was calling for about 30 minutes of 5-on-5, gold, silver, or bronze, and giving them, again, feedback on what it was. Now, the other part of the environment that teaches them is their teammates teach them what a good shot is, right? And if there's a bad shot in a practice, again, not one time, but an outlier where it's like a bad shot and then there's multiple bad shots from the same player, I'll stop and ask the team, are we okay with that shot? Is that a good shot for us? Now, of course, I'll also represent that in the other way where, to Dave's point, where it's like somebody misses an open shot and maybe they miss a few in a row, I will connect it to the team and say, hey, is everyone okay that Matt shot those shots? And they'll all say yes, because they have a knowledge of what our principles of play are and what we value. And that's where I say the environment teaches shot selection, because we've created the environment that explains what a good shot is.
I view this through a different lens, which I'm not taking it. Chris has his lens that he's viewing it from. Mine is going to be more like, how well did you shoot that shot? I view my job as being more helping players correct the biomechanics of shooting. And while I agree with everything that he says, it will be to how well did you shoot it? Did you give yourself that bullseye in the middle of the board? so that you have the wiggle room around. That would be the difference from my lens.
And I agree that from an individual player basis is, how did it feel? Yeah, how did it feel? Did it feel good? It was a good shot. It's really that simple. And also to players that put in a lot of work and work on their shot. Or I'll tell you an example. I had a 10-year-old at one of my AAU practices, group player development practices. I don't really separate group and team and player. They're all the same. But anyways, she had been told on her team to not shoot. And I'm like, this is a 10-year-old. And the first thing I went up to her is I said, shoot the ball. Every time you're open, shoot the ball. And then I made sure that I noticed and normalized for her the fact that, one, yes, I want you to shoot. And two, right, you're going to miss. But hey, now you want to make those shots, go work on your shot. But where was her motivation to ever work on her shot if she was told to not shoot at 10? And then we're the coaches, oh, you got to work on your shot. You got to shoot 100 shots a day. And she's going, why would I ever do that? You don't let me shoot. Talk about player development. The most important part of player development is psychological safety for the player, in knowing that what they're going to work on is going to help them in the games. And that's it. If they don't feel it, why would they do it on their own?
Good for you.
Wow. Yeah, thank you for honoring that tangent. Again, it's a little more simplistic than these sort of broader ideas. But again, I think as the voice of the people, sometimes I want to get a feel for how you're processing, because that can only make me a better coach. Gents, we're getting close to Chris's hard stop here. Chris, Dave, you're good for a little bit longer? Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to skip Dave's fourth, but Dave, give me your fourth concept that you want to chat about.
And this is something I'm really trying to learn more about myself, like just dive into the constraint-led approach. Instead of explicitly teaching what a player needs to do, use constraints on drills to guide them towards a more optimal solution. And their more optimal solution may be different than what you have in mind, but you're going to use your coaching experience to guide them towards that discovery.
Love it. Just ask yourself, what made their decision more right or wrong than your decision as a coach? Like, we constantly, I would say someone's wrong, but are they wrong, or did they just make a decision different than you would have as a coach? And we know that Matt, me, and Dave would all make different decisions based on our talent, our ability, our understanding, our comfort of different things. So of course, players are going to make different decisions. But really, just to summarize that for everyone, a constraint-led approach is something that shapes learning. So we essentially do something, we limit something to afford something. So let's say in practice last night, we limited the use of the dribble. So our initial 3-on-2 shooting from half court, starting from half court, was we're all in a bunch spacing. So we've reduced spacing, but the limit or the constraint is nobody can dribble. So you got to figure out a solution based on that. And instead of telling them, hey, do this, the idea of the constraint-led approach is we don't tell them anything. We just give them the constraint. And all I do is call out the constraint. So if somebody dribbled, I just say foul, which means turnover, and then they lose possession. That's it. That's all I'm coaching. I'm not giving any other technical or tactical or technique-based information. They're trying to figure it out. Now, then I can bring them in the constraint-led approach, and I can use questions to find solutions, or obviously I can give really explicit instruction as well and say, we've got to create space, got to get to space initially so it's easier to pass when you can't dribble. Those type of things.
Would you say that
my most common example of constraint that I'm going to use is removing the guide hand at the set point? And I'll adjust the drill in different ways so that players are able to do that. But I'll over-exaggerate, remove the guide hand, which then forces their shooting hand to figure out where it needs to be. And I've got an idea of where I think that is. But instead of me saying, I want you to put your finger here, which I probably admittedly do too much of that, just adding the constraint of remove your guide hand, and your shooting hand is going to figure it out.
Would you say it's fair that constraints-led approach is a method of contextual interference?
Yeah, they're all lumped in. Yeah, they're all lumped in. I mean, and again, that's the problem when we go so down. They're all different. Don't misconstrue it. They're all somewhat different in terms of their meaning, but in a whole perspective from what a coach needs to understand, it's just as simple as create some mindful practice. create some mindful practice, reduce your feedback and your explicit instruction where you tell them exactly what to do, and provide them more opportunity for self-discovery and figuring things out on their own. That's really the whole thing together.
That's the clip also. Show that to all your coaching buddies. Okay, we'll wrap this up now. Okay, we've got, Chris, I think you have 2 left, and Dave, I think you have 1. I think I got the orders all mixed up here. Chris, fire away with the next one.
Add a defender. Just add a defender. If you're not sure about any of this, and you don't necessarily have to understand it, intuitively you know that when you add a defender, you change the type of dribble, you change the type of pass, you change the type of shot. So add a defender. Let's take a 3-on-0 full court drill. Must shoot a 3 while at a constraint. It must be to a 3. It's not to a layup. And just add 1 defender. Instead of doing a 3-on-0 pass and becomes mindless, add 1 defender, and now they have to figure out something. And their passes become more realistic. Their dribbles become more realistic. Their decisions become, and surely the shot pressure becomes a little more realistic. So it's just simply that.
Chris, what would you do when the live defender is too challenging? What constraints would you put on a defender to adjust the challenge point?
So one of the key parts of a constraint-led approach is that if you want to shape offense, then constrain the defense, right? And then if you want to shape defense, then constrain the offense. So in this example, like the defense, we can constrain them to say 3-on-1 might be a bad example. Let's say it's 3-on-2 more type of thing, but a 3-on-2 type of situation. And the offense cannot dribble, which I gave you this example already. What does a smart defender or smart defenders do is they go deny the players off the ball. So we'll create a constraint of saying the defense must always cover the ball, right? Because now I wouldn't do that until the defense learns to cheat, right? And learning to cheat is saying, okay, it's 3-on-2, they can't dribble. Let's not cover the ball and let's go deny everyone off the ball. I counter that by creating a constraint to be able to do that. Sometimes, again, Dave, we know that we can also reduce the challenge point by making the defense guided rather than live, that type of situation. And I do that with my daughters all the time, where I'll play certain types of defense on them just to cue a decision that they don't know they're going to make. And then after that, it's not live. I'm not trying to actively stop them. And in fact, I'm playing defense almost all the time.
Very cool. Very cool. Dave, what is your final skill acquisition
concept? I want people to understand the challenge point, like understand what that means, because to me, that's like everything is know the habit that you're working on and then adjust the level of difficulty of the drill, make it as game representative as you can while guiding towards the habit that you're working on. And we should be constantly adjusting the level of difficulty of the drill because the player is probably getting better at the skill. So we should be moving towards game representativeness and constantly adjusting the challenge point rather than just, as we talked about, like doing the same thing over and over again with no challenge.
It's one of the things we talk about the most, to be honest. And I think it is so fair because regardless of the situation, there is an appropriate challenge point for the specific player. And far too often, again, I use my own team's practices. Too often it's such a broad, we're either playing too much in scrimmage where it's completely random. And for a couple of the guys, specifically one, Dave, you analyzed his shot, our big guy, our rookie, it's probably too challenging a situation for him to be in all the time. And we really haven't adjusted challenge point to suit his development. So something I need to work on.
Just give coaches a simple understanding of this. If your players are making mistakes in practice in on-air drills or block drills, it's because of the challenge point. It's not because, oh, you're not focused or you're not engaged or you're not excited for practice. No, they're bored. They're bored. Like anytime I go to practice and a coach is doing like 3-man weave to 25 and they don't get 25 in under 2 minutes, it's not because 3-man weave is hard. It's because they're bored. And I don't know a nicer way to say it. So we'll just say that. It's mindless. They're not interested. Find a challenge point so they're interested.
I always joke with players in a clinic. I'll say, like, why do you guys hate form shooting? And nobody wants to answer. I'm like, don't be afraid to say it. Not only are you correct in what the answer that you're going to give, I also know what you're going to say. And I also agree with you. And then somebody will say, because it's boring. Yes,
Yeah.
it's pooping. We make sure that we don't curse here. It's pooping boring. Poop isn't worth it. Anyways,
Well, Matt, you go play pickup. Yeah, Matt goes and plays pickup. The first thing he does before he plays the game is he does 3-man weave, zigzag drill, form shooting.
That's right.
And
Every
shelter,
time.
right? Yeah, you do that. Every time you go play pickup, that's, hey guys, let's do our zigzag. No, nobody connects with it. So why are we doing it with players? Honestly. And I'm not saying don't ever do it, but don't start with it. And that'll lead into my number 5, which there's a tease.
You really broke the mold there. You hit all 5 of my my high school, college coaches. You played the hits. You don't know them, and you know them. Let's take one last super quick break before we get to your last concept.
Hey there, basketball fans. Coach Dave Love here with an exciting opportunity to revolutionize your shooting game. Introducing my exclusive shot development systems, Pure Release, Consistency and Balance, and Fluidity and Arc. Each system is designed to target key aspects of your shooting technique, transforming you into a more effective player on the court. Pure Release focuses on perfecting your shot release. Consistency and Balance enhances your stability and accuracy, and Fluidity and Arc works on your ball path and trajectory of your shot. Find out the drills and progressions that I use with my NBA players to improve these important habits. Can't decide which one to choose? No worries, grab the bundle and get all 3 systems at a fantastic value. It's a complete package to elevate every part of your shooting game. And there's a special deal for all my podcast listeners. Use the promo code PODCAST20 at checkout to save 20% on any of the shot development systems. Don't miss this chance to train like the pros. Visit CoachDaveLove.com/store and take your first step towards shooting success. That's CoachDaveLove.com/store.
All right, welcome back. Chris, let's get your final concept here before we wrap up the pod. What's the last thing you want to talk about?
Okay, so coaches have all heard of whole part, all that stuff. That's very common. I think we all generally understand that in coaching. Look, I don't know if this is research, but this is experiential. I am a whole part only if I need it, coach. I feel that progressions slow down learning and that we use far too many predetermined progressions that slow down learning. So I'll give you an example. New group, never been with me, 10 to 12-year-olds. It's player development sessions. We spent 2 hours on playing just 5-on-5, where I would introduce a few conceptual concepts around our principles of play that I already gave to you. And that whole 2 hours was spent on the whole. And now tonight's a second session with them. Now I'm going to go and we can do a whole bunch of the small-sided games or the different things like that. We're still not doing anything on air, but we're going to do a whole bunch of small-sided games that connects it. But how am I going to do it? I'm going to go to practice and we're going to play 5-on-5 like we did last week and really figure out what we need to do. Because I'm like, if I don't have to do some of these, I have an idea, okay, we need to do this and wrote them down. But crap, if I don't have to do it, I'm not doing it because it takes away time from what's actually important. And that's where it becomes all back to this law of biological individuality, which is even more important in this process, is that every player is unique. So maybe my one daughter can handle this and my other daughter can't. I got to find a way to be able to have mini conversations with my one daughter that's struggling and support my other one that's doing it well. And that's going to be a group of 20 players there. And I'm going to have different conversations in different moments where I might have to coach them more while they're playing or less than while they're playing. You know, my one daughter, I don't have to coach much while she's playing because she's got the concept figured out. My other daughter, I got to hold, recreate, and follow feedback with action. And then we play from there. Parts only if I need it. That
took me a second to get there. I completely understand what you're saying. Coach Dave, I think you had.
Well, no, I did. I was with you, Matt, where when Coach said whole and part when I need it, I'm like, and then hearing the explanation, I'm like, okay, now I get it. And that's like my, yeah.
I'm here to challenge
in
you.
my life, that's beyond our friendship. That's your role in my life, Chris. And I appreciate you for it. And so my little take on that is players at the level that I'm at are working with me because they need the part. And how I would train a 12-year-old who has emerging skills and a lot of time to develop them would be very different than a pro who they struggle with the one part. And so I really like what
I would challenge you to think about it all this way. The first thing you do at every one of your shooting workouts is shoot. With no drill, no constraint, they just shoot. And then from there, go to the parts. Because it's connecting it back and forth. Why are you doing the parts? You're trying to connect it to the hole. If they don't do the hole to start with, they think the part is the thing. That's the only thing I would challenge you on. So even for a new shooter, when my daughter started, I already gave those examples. We just shot. And then I'd give them parts for sure. I'd isolate things like Dave's talking about. But they were always, let's shoot. Okay, let's try this. And now let's come back to your shot. Because too often we do them all as these separate silos type of things instead of, again, interconnect them. So
yeah,
does that connect with you a little bit, Dave?
I love that.
And I think you do that. So I'm not questioning what
Perfect.
That's
gentlemen.
Yeah.
Like, this has been such an incredible conversation. Like, my brain is starting to get tired, and that's different from my brain wandering or being bored or whatever. It's actually getting tired because we've gone through so many things that I have loose understanding of or no understanding of it all. So I really appreciate you both being willing to meet me at the level that I'm at and challenge me in that way. And I actually will have to go back and listen to this again just to make sure I lock in all of these things, because this has been really educational for me. And I would bet that the coaches out there listening, regardless of level, were able to get at least a couple of pearls from this, if not a whole necklace. This has been phenomenal, gentlemen. Thank you very much for the time.
Well, thank you for having me. And I would just challenge all coaches to spend some time and digest these ideas. Like, you are responsible for your learning, and it's time to digest these ideas. This is not coach the way you coached 25 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Man, the rate of human expansion is just beyond us, and we've got to find a way to keep up. And that's through a lot of experiential and evidence-based knowledge. So give some of these ideas a shot. Connect with us on social media and let us know how it goes.
Chris, I hope you'll come on again so we can dig down granularly. But where can the people find you online?
Twitter at B-Ball Immersion, Instagram at Coach B-Ball Immersion, and then at basketballimmersion.com, our website, our membership community. As low as $33, you can get access to, I would say, upwards of 800 videos now and courses and different things that explain all these concepts. And there's systems, there's team systems like the two-side break. It's not limited to just how you teach and what you teach. Is it there as well? But really just a comprehensive website for one-stop shopping to be able to help you, because the best player development is coach development. And I thank you both for doing that, because you're adding to that as well. And it's just tremendous to be a part of it.
Coach Dave, anything to add, and where can the people find you?
Yeah, the thing I want to add, or two things I want to add. If you're listening to this podcast and you're not listening to Chris Oliver's podcast, you've made a mistake. And if you haven't listened to his, get on his podcast and get on his newsletter and everything else. I'm not joking, probably the most influential coach in my career over the last 10 years. And then the encouragement would be, just start with one idea. Don't feel like you have to overhaul the way that you do things. Just pick one of these ideas. I started with Chris's, read the hands. If the hands are up, you're going to pass back. If the hands are down, that's where I started. And then you grow from there. And in the beginning, nothing really made sense. And then slowly over time, you piece together the puzzle and hopefully grow as a coach.
And the people can find you at?
CoachDaveLove.com. Don't worry about me. Go to basketballimmersion.com.
To all the listeners out there, to the dozens of you, thank you very much for tuning in. We appreciate the time. Chris Oliver, awesome session. You can find me on Twitter at Coach Matty Rob. You probably won't really find anything of value there, because I'm just tweeting out stuff from these guys that is valuable. Thanks very much for coming out. We look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Coach Dave Love Podcast. To stay up to date with our future episodes, please remember to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to sign up for Coach Love's free shooting newsletter on CoachDaveLove.com, and be sure to follow him on social media. You can find him at Coach Dave Love.